Something extraordinary is unfolding inside Britain's corridors of power. King Charles has issued a direct demand for action, and for the first time, Keir Starmer doesn't have an answer. Not a speech, not a rebuttal, just silence. And that silence is now shaking Westminster to its core. This moment did not come out of nowhere. According to senior parliamentary sources, the King has privately and firmly demanded immediate corrective action on what he described as a dangerous imbalance in Britain's governance. Those words alone sent shockwaves through Downing Street. Unlike symbolic royal statements of the past, this was different. This was specific. This was urgent. And most alarming for Labour, it came with an expectation of response, not rhetoric. Within hours, officials confirmed that Starmer had been summoned to an emergency briefing involving constitutional advisers and senior civil servants. What followed was not confidence but confusion. Witnesses describe a Prime Minister visibly unsettled, flipping through briefing notes, asking aides for legal clarifications that should have already been prepared. One aide reportedly muttered, "We didn't think he'd push this far." The room went quiet. The demand itself centres on accountability and restraint. Palace insiders say the King made it clear that continued pressure on Britain's institutions, combined with worsening public hardship, could no longer be ignored. This wasn't framed as politics, it was framed as duty, and that distinction matters. Because when Charles speaks in the language of duty, he speaks with centuries of authority behind him. Starmer, by contrast, is trapped in the present. Rising inflation, collapsing confidence, backbench MPs openly questioning his leadership. When news of the King's demand leaked, markets reacted instantly, government bonds wobbled. The pound slipped. Commentators began using a word no Prime Minister wants attached to their name: weakened. Inside Parliament, Labour MPs are reportedly split between panic and anger. Several are said to believe Starmer underestimated the Crown, assuming the monarchy would remain passive no matter how aggressive the reforms became. That assumption is now haunting him. One senior Labour figure told reporters off the record, "We're reacting to events instead of controlling them, and that's fatal." Meanwhile, Conservative benches remain unusually calm. They don't need to say much. The contrast speaks for itself. A King demanding stability, a Prime Minister struggling to respond. Perhaps most telling is what hasn't happened yet. No firm statement, no clear plan, no decisive move from Downing Street. Every hour that passes without action amplifies the perception of paralysis. Political analysts are already warning that this is no longer just a policy dispute. It's a test of leadership under pressure. Can Starmer act decisively when confronted not by opposition MPs but by the Crown itself? Or will hesitation define him? Because in British politics, hesitation at moments like this doesn't fade quietly. It becomes history. And as night falls over Westminster, one truth is becoming impossible to ignore. King Charles has drawn a line. Action is now demanded, not debated. The question isn't whether Starmer is under pressure. The question is whether he can survive it. Behind closed doors, the pressure on Starmer has intensified to a level few Prime Ministers ever experience. Senior civil servants describe Downing Street as tense, fragmented, and increasingly distrustful. Meetings stretched late into the night, not to plan bold action, but to contain fallout. Drafted statements are written, rewritten, then scrapped entirely. No one can agree on wording because no one can agree on direction. The core problem is simple but devastating. The King's demand forces Starmer to choose between ideology and stability. Palace sources say Charles has made it clear that symbolic gestures will not be enough. He expects tangible steps that reaffirm constitutional balance and relieve public suffering. That expectation has left Labour strategists scrambling. If Starmer concedes, even partially, he risks alienating his activist base and admitting miscalculation. If he refuses, he risks appearing reckless, even defiant, in the face of the Crown. Either path carries consequences, and hesitation only deepens the damage. Meanwhile, Labour MPs are no longer whispering, they are talking openly. Private group chats have turned brutal, with some MPs warning that the party is sleepwalking into disaster. Several marginal seat MPs are said to be furious, arguing that while voters struggle with heating bills and food prices, the government looks consumed by internal battles and constitutional brinkmanship. One MP reportedly wrote, "My constituents don't care about power games, they care about surviving winter." That message is spreading fast. Pollsters confirm that public confidence in Labour leadership has dipped sharply since news of the King's intervention broke. Focus groups describe Starmer as overmatched and out of his depth. These are words that linger. Once they attach, they rarely disappear. The opposition is watching carefully, almost patiently. Conservatives have largely avoided direct attacks, allowing events to speak for themselves. Reform UK, however, has seized the moment aggressively. Nigel Farage has framed the crisis as proof that Labour cannot be trusted with Britain's institutions. His message is simple and effective. When tradition and stability were challenged, the King stood firm and Labour faltered. That narrative is gaining traction, especially in working class areas where frustration with politics runs deep. Party insiders say donations have surged since the King's demand became public, driven by supporters who see this as a defining national moment. What makes this situation especially volatile is the King's restraint. Charles has not repeated his demand publicly. He hasn't escalated. He hasn't lectured. And that restraint is precisely what unsettles Westminster. Experienced politicians know that quiet resolve from the Crown carries more weight than dramatic confrontation. It signals confidence, not desperation. In contrast, Starmer's silence feels uncertain. Each day without a clear response fuels speculation that he is boxed in by his own decisions. Even allies privately admit they don't know how he plans to navigate this. One senior advisor confessed, "We assumed time was on our side. Now it feels like time is working against us." The broader implications are impossible to ignore. Britain's system relies on unwritten rules, mutual respect and an understanding of limits. When those limits are tested, consequences ripple outward. International observers are already questioning whether the UK's political leadership can manage internal conflict without destabilising markets and alliances. Credit agencies have quietly flagged governance risk. Diplomats describe confusion about who is truly steering the country through uncertainty. This isn't panic yet, but it's unease, and unease is often the first warning sign. As dawn approaches and another day looms over Westminster, Starmer faces a narrowing window. Respond decisively and he risks internal revolt. Delay further and he risks being defined as the Prime Minister who froze when history demanded movement. King Charles has made his position clear without raising his voice. Now the spotlight burns hotter on Downing Street. Action is expected. The country is watching. And in British politics, moments like this don't pass quietly. They determine who leads, who falls, and how history remembers them.